General Zarak had seen many species serve in the Galactic Defense Force, but humans remained the most puzzling. The bipedal creatures from the third planet of a yellow star had joined the Alliance only 50 cycles ago, yet they had already earned a reputation that made seasoned warriors from across the galaxy step back in respect. Private Marcus Chen was one such human. At just 22 Earth years old, he had already distinguished himself in 3 major campaigns against the Void Swarm. His service record gleamed with commendations, and his fellow soldiers spoke of his bravery in hushed, reverent tones. Yet something about the young human troubled General Zarak. The Calaxian general stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the space station's artificial lights. His species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived, and they prized military excellence above all else. Zarak had commanded forces across 17 star systems and had never encountered a soldier quite like Chen. During combat, Chen was a force of nature. The general had watched security footage of the humans single-handedly holding a breach in their defensive line for 6 hours while reinforcements arrived. Chen had taken wounds that would have felled most species, yet he kept fighting with a determination that bordered on the supernatural. But it was what happened after the battles that caught Zarak's attention. While other soldiers celebrated their victories or mourned their losses in the traditional ways of their species, Chen would simply disappear. He would complete his post-mission reports with mechanical precision, attend the mandatory debriefings, and then vanish until the next duty shift. None of his squad mates seemed to know where he went or what he did during these periods. The general's curiosity had been building for months. He had tried asking Chen directly during performance reviews, but the human would only give vague responses about personal time and relaxation. Zarak had considered it none of his business until the incident on Kepler Station. The space station served as a major hub for military operations in the sector. It housed nearly 1 million beings from hundreds of different species, all working together to maintain the peace that the Galactic Defense Force had fought so hard to establish. The station's lower levels contained residential quarters, recreational facilities, and the various services that kept such a massive population functioning. Chen had just returned from a particularly brutal mission. His unit had been tasked with evacuating a civilian population from a planet under Void Swarm attack. They had succeeded, but barely. Half of Chen's squad had been wounded, and they had lost 2 good soldiers in the process. The human had led the final extraction himself, carrying wounded civilians to the transport ships while enemy fire rained down around him. In the debriefing, Chen had been his usual professional self. He answered questions clearly and concisely, provided detailed tactical analysis, and submitted his written report without delay. But Zarak noticed something in the human's eyes that he had never seen before, a depth of emotion that the young soldier was clearly struggling to contain. As the debriefing concluded, Zarak made a decision that would change his understanding of humanity forever. Instead of returning to his quarters as he normally would, he decided to follow Chen and discover what the human did during his mysterious disappearances. The general waited several minutes before leaving the briefing room, giving Chen time to get ahead. Zarak's species possessed natural stealth capabilities, their crystalline skin able to refract light in ways that made them nearly invisible when they chose to be. It was a skill that had served him well during his military career, and now he put it to use for a very different purpose. Chen moved through the station's corridors with purpose, but not toward the recreational areas where most soldiers would go to unwind. Instead, he headed deeper into the residential sections, taking transport tubes that led to areas Zarak rarely visited. The general followed at a distance, his curiosity growing with each turn. The human's destination was in one of the older sections of the station, where the corridors were narrower and the lighting dimmer. This was where the station's support staff lived, the beings who kept the massive structure running but rarely interacted with the military personnel. It was an area that most officers never saw, hidden away from the gleaming command centers and training facilities that dominated the upper levels. Chen stopped before a nondescript door and pressed his palm against the access panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss and the human stepped inside. Zarak moved closer, finding a position where he could observe without being detected. What he saw through the partially open door made him pause in confusion. The room was clearly Chen's private quarters, but it was unlike any soldier's room the general had ever seen. Instead of the usual military efficiency and sparse decoration, the space was filled with an overwhelming collection of objects that seemed to serve no practical purpose. There were small images mounted on the walls, pieces of fabric in various colors, and dozens of small items scattered across every available surface. But it was not the objects themselves that caught Zarek's attention. It was what Chen was doing with them. Chen moved through his quarters with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone who had been wielding heavy weapons just hours before. The same hands that had torn through enemy lines with ruthless efficiency now handled delicate objects with the care one might show to precious artifacts. The human picked up one of the small images from a shelf, and Zarek could see his lips moving as though he were speaking to it. The general's enhanced hearing allowed him to catch fragments of Chen's words, and what he heard made his crystalline skin shimmer with confusion. "Hey, Mom. Rough day today. Lost Jenkins and Kozlov. Good soldiers, both of them. Jenkins had a kid on the way, you know. Little girl. He showed me the ultrasound picture just last week." Chen's voice carried a weight that Zarek had never heard in any of their professional interactions. The human's shoulders sagged as he spoke, and the general realized he was witnessing something intensely private. Yet he found himself unable to look away. The human moved to another image, this one showing a group of young humans in what appeared to be recreational clothing. Their faces were bright with the kind of joy that the general rarely saw among military personnel. Chen touched the frame gently before speaking again. "Sarah, I hope you're doing well in medical school. I know I promised I'd be there for your graduation, but things are complicated out here. The war's not going as well as the news feeds back home suggest. We're holding the line, but just barely." Zarek's understanding of human psychology was limited, but he was beginning to piece together what he was witnessing. These images were not random decorations. They were connections to Chen's past, to a life and a world that existed far beyond the military campaigns and endless conflict of their current reality. The general watched as Chen continued his ritual, moving from image to image, speaking to each one as though the people within could hear his words. Some conversations were brief, others lasted several minutes. The human spoke of daily events, shared tactical observations, and expressed concerns about the war's progress. But more than anything, he spoke of the people he fought alongside and the civilians they protected. "Tommy, remember when we used to complain about Mrs. Henderson's math tests? Funny how that seems so simple now. I'd give anything to sit in her classroom again. Worrying about nothing more than whether I studied enough for a quiz." The emotion in Chen's voice was growing stronger, and Zarek noticed that the human's hands were beginning to shake slightly. The general had seen this before in other species, the gradual breakdown that came when the stress of constant warfare finally overwhelmed even the strongest minds. But what happened next defied every expectation the general had about how such moments typically unfolded. Instead of breaking down completely, Chen seemed to draw strength from these conversations. His voice grew steadier as he continued speaking to the images, and his posture gradually straightened. The human was not simply talking to pictures, Zarek realized. He was reconnecting with something essential about himself, something that the war had been slowly eroding. "Dad, I know you worry about me out here, but I want you to know that everything you taught me about doing what's right, about protecting people who can't protect themselves, that's what keeps me going. Every mission, every battle, I remember what you said about standing up for others." Chen moved to a corner of the room where a small box sat on a simple table. He opened it carefully, revealing what appeared to be personal items from his homeworld. Zarek watched as the human lifted out a small piece of fabric, worn and faded with age. Chen held it close to his face for a moment, breathing deeply. "I still have it, Grandma. The blanket you made me when I was 7. I know it's silly, carrying it across the galaxy, but sometimes when things get really bad, I remember sitting with you while you worked on it. You told me that every stitch was made with love, and that as long as I had it, I'd always have family with me." The general felt something shift in his own perception as he watched this display. Among the Calaxians, emotional attachment was considered a weakness that could compromise military effectiveness. Soldiers were expected to sever personal connections and dedicate themselves entirely to their duty. It was a philosophy that had served his species well for thousands of years, but Chen was showing him something different. The human was not weakened by these connections. Instead, they seemed to provide him with a source of strength that went beyond mere physical courage or tactical skill. The love and memories he carried were not burdens to be discarded. but fuel that powered his extraordinary determination in battle. Chen closed the box and moved to what appeared to be a small journal lying open on his desk. He picked up a writing implement and began to record his thoughts, speaking aloud as he wrote. Mission log, personal entry. Kepler evacuation successful, but at significant cost. The Void Swarm's tactics are evolving faster than our ability to counter them. We need new strategies, better coordination between species. Note to self, speak with General Zarek about joint training exercises with Calaxian Crystal Warriors. Even in his private moments, Chen was thinking about ways to improve their effectiveness as a fighting force. But more than that, he was considering how to better integrate the various species under Zarek's command. The general had noticed the humans' efforts to bridge cultural gaps between different alien soldiers, but he had not realized the depth of thought that went into these initiatives. The journal entry continued for several minutes, covering tactical observations, personnel recommendations, and strategic considerations. But then Chen's tone shifted again, becoming more personal. I dream about home more often now. Not nightmares about the war, but good dreams about ordinary things. Sitting in the backyard with Dad, helping Mom in the garden, playing catch with my little brother. I wake up and for just a moment I forget where I am. Then reality comes rushing back. Chen set down his writing implement and moved to another section of his quarters that Zarek had not noticed before. Hidden behind a partition was what appeared to be a small workshop area. Tools and materials were arranged with military precision, but the projects scattered across the work surface were unlike anything the general had seen in a soldier's quarters. The human picked up a partially completed object that seemed to be carved from some kind of dense material. As Chen worked on it with delicate tools, Zarek could see that it was taking the shape of a small figurine. The craftsmanship was remarkable, showing attention to detail that would have impressed artisans from any species in the galaxy. This one's for Martinez, Chen said quietly as he worked. He mentioned that his daughter collects horses from different worlds. This is supposed to be one of those six-legged creatures from Altair Prime. I'm probably getting the proportions wrong, but I hope she likes it anyway. The general watched in fascination as Chen continued his work. The human's hands moved with the same precision he showed when field stripping weapons or performing equipment maintenance, but the purpose was entirely different. This was creation instead of destruction, beauty instead of utility. The work table held several other completed projects. There was a small musical instrument that Zarek recognized as being from the Centauri system, an intricate piece of jewelry that appeared to be made in the style favored by the insectoid hive species, and what looked like a traditional weapon from the warrior culture of Rigel 7, though this one was clearly decorative rather than functional. I know they probably think I'm crazy, Chen continued, addressing one of the photos on the wall. A human soldier spending his free time making gifts for alien comrades. But when Specialist Click mentioned that his molting ceremony was coming up and he'd be honored if someone from outside his species acknowledged it with a traditional gift, how could I not try? Zarek's understanding of Chen's character was being completely rewritten. The general had assumed that the human's effectiveness in combat came from the same kind of cold professionalism that his own species valued. But this was something else entirely. Chen fought so fiercely not because he had disconnected from emotion, but because he had connected so deeply with everyone around him. The human moved to a corner where several plants grew under artificial lighting. Zarek recognized them as native to Earth, though he was not familiar with their specific types. Chen checked their water levels and adjusted their position to optimize their exposure to the light. As he worked, he spoke to them as though they were old friends. I know this isn't home, little guys, but we're all doing our best out here. Maybe someday I'll be able to take you back to real soil, real sunlight. Until then, we'll make do with what we have. The care Chen showed for these simple plants revealed another layer of his character. Despite being surrounded by the advanced technology of a spacefaring civilization, the human had found ways to maintain connections to the natural world of his birth. It was a reminder of where he came from and who he was beneath the military uniform and tactical expertise. Chen's quarters also contained what appeared to be a small shrine or memorial area. Photos of soldiers were arranged there, some human and others from various alien species. Each had a small object placed beside it, personal items that someone had clearly treasured. Zarek realized he was looking at a memorial for fallen comrades, maintained by Chen as a way of honoring their sacrifice. The human knelt before the memorial and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Jenkins, Kozlov, I know you can't hear me, but I made sure your families got the letters. I told them how brave you were, how you saved those civilians on Kepler 6. Your kids will grow up knowing their fathers were heroes." The general watched, as Chen lit a small candle beside each new photo, a ritual that was clearly meaningful to the human, even though his species had no religious requirements for such practices. This was something Chen did because he chose to do it, because it helped him process the loss of people he had cared about. "I promised Kozlov's wife I'd visit when I get leave. She's going to name the baby after him. Little Marcus Kozlov can. You believe that?" She said she wanted him to have a strong name, someone who would remind him of his father's courage. The emotion in Chen's voice was building again, but this time Zarek could see that it was not weakening the human. Instead, it seemed to be strengthening his resolve. The grief and love and determination were all woven together into something that made Chen more than just an effective soldier. They made him someone worth following. Chen stood and moved to a communications terminal that had been modified with additional security protocols. He activated it and began composing what appeared to be personal messages. The general could not see the specific content, but he could hear Chen's side of recorded video communications. "Hey Mom, I can't tell you much about where I am or what we're doing, but I wanted you to know I'm safe. The food's not as good as yours, but nobody can make spaghetti like you anyway. I miss Sunday dinners. I miss all of you." The human recorded several such messages, each one tailored to a specific recipient. He spoke to his parents, siblings, friends from his past life on Earth. Each conversation was filled with love and longing, but also with strength and purpose. Chen was not simply surviving his military service. He was carrying his connections to home as a source of power. "Dad, I know you didn't want me to enlist. You said there were too many wars, too much fighting in the galaxy. But out here, I see what we're really fighting for. It's not about territory or resources or political power. It's about making sure kids can grow up safe, about protecting families like ours from things that would destroy everything we love." As Chen finished his messages, he moved to what appeared to be a small exercise area. But instead of the aggressive training routines that most soldiers used to maintain their combat readiness, the human began practicing movements that seemed almost dance-like in their fluidity. Zarek recognized them as a form of martial art, but one focused on meditation and mental discipline rather than pure combat effectiveness. The movements Chen performed were unlike anything in the general's experience with human combat techniques. Each gesture flowed into the next with perfect control, and the human's breathing followed a precise rhythm that seemed to calm his entire body. Zarek could see tension leaving Chen's shoulders as he continued the routine, the stress of recent combat gradually fading away. "Grandpa taught me this when I was 12, Chen said to one of the photos on his wall as he moved through the forms. He said it wasn't about fighting other people. It was about fighting the chaos inside yourself, finding peace even when the world around you was falling apart." The general watched as Chen's movements became more complex, requiring incredible balance and coordination. But more than the physical skill involved, Zarek was struck by the mental discipline the human was demonstrating. This was not just exercise or stress relief. It was a systematic method for maintaining psychological stability under conditions that would break most beings. After completing his routine, Chen sat cross-legged on a simple mat and closed his eyes. The general had heard of human meditation practices but had never witnessed one firsthand. For nearly 30 minutes, Chen remained motionless, his breathing slow and steady. The room fell completely silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. When Chen finally opened his eyes, something had changed in his expression. The weight of recent losses was still there, but it was balanced by something else, a calm determination that seemed unshakable. The human stood and moved to a communication panel, but this time he was not recording personal messages. Instead, he began accessing military databases and tactical reports. "Computer, show me casualty rates for joint operations involving human and Calaxian units versus single-species operations." The data that appeared on Chen's screen made Zarek lean forward with interest. The human was conducting his own analysis of their military effectiveness, looking for patterns that might improve their success rates and reduce losses. This was far beyond what was expected of a soldier at Chen's rank, yet he was doing it during his personal time. Interesting. Mixed units have 12% better survival rates and 15% better mission success rates. But coordination problems still cause delays in 40% of operations. Need to find ways to improve interspecies communication protocols. Chen pulled up video footage from recent battles, studying the movements and tactics of different alien species. The general watched as the human made notes about the strengths and weaknesses of various approaches, always with an eye toward how they could be combined more effectively. Calaxian crystal warriors excel at defensive positions and heavy assault, but their charge tactics leave flanks exposed. Human mobility could provide covering fire during advances. Hive species perfect for reconnaissance and infiltration, but need support for direct engagement. The analysis continued for over an hour, with Chen examining every aspect of their recent operations. But what impressed Zarek most was the human's approach to criticism. When Chen identified problems or failures, he never blamed the alien species involved. Instead, he looked for ways to adapt human tactics to complement their allies' natural abilities. Note for training proposal: introduce Rigelian squad leaders to human small unit tactics. Their enhanced reflexes combined with our adaptive strategies could revolutionize close-quarters combat. Recommend joint exercises in simulated urban environments. As Chen worked, he occasionally paused to sip from a cup containing some kind of hot beverage. The aroma reached Zarek's enhanced senses, and he recognized it as a blend of earth plants that humans called tea. The general had encountered it before during diplomatic functions but had never understood its significance. Now he realized it was another connection to home, another way Chen maintained his identity despite being surrounded by alien technology and customs. The humans' quarters also contained what appeared to be a small library of physical books. Zarek had heard that humans still use such primitive information storage methods despite having access to advanced digital systems, but he had never understood why. As he watched Chen select one of the books and begin reading, the general began to grasp the appeal. The book Chen chose was worn with age and frequent handling. The human opened it carefully, treating it like a precious artifact. As he read, his lips moved slightly, and Zarek realized he was absorbing not just information but comfort from the familiar words and ideas. Still the best advice anyone ever gave me, Chen said softly, addressing the book itself. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Thanks for the reminder, Mr. Emerson. The general's knowledge of human literature was limited, but he could see that this was more than casual reading. Chen was engaging with ideas and philosophies that helped him maintain his sense of self in an environment that could easily strip away individual identity. The book was another tool for psychological survival, as important as any weapon in his arsenal. Chen spent another hour reading, occasionally making notes in a separate journal. When he finally closed the book, he moved to what appeared to be the final element of his nightly routine. From a secure container, he removed a small device that Zarek recognized as a quantum communicator, one of the few technologies that could transmit messages across galactic distances in real time. The human activated the device and waited patiently as it established a connection. When the transmission stabilized, Chen's entire demeanor changed. His face lit up with genuine joy as a holographic image appeared above the communicator, showing a group of humans in what was clearly a domestic setting on Earth. Marcus, oh my goodness, look how thin you've gotten. Are they feeding you enough out there? The voice belonged to an older human female, and the love in her tone was unmistakable. Chen's mother, Zarek realized. The general had heard of human family bonds but had never witnessed one in action. The pure emotional connection between Chen and the holographic figures was unlike anything in Calaxian culture. I'm fine, Mom. The food's actually pretty good. We get rations from all over the galaxy now. I tried this Andromedan fruit paste last week that was amazing. Tasted like a combination of strawberries and something I can't even describe. The conversation that followed was completely ordinary by human standards, but revolutionary for Zarek's understanding of what motivated his best soldier. Chen spoke with his family about mundane things, everyday events happening on a world light years away from the war zone. Yet these simple exchanges seemed to energize the human in ways that military commendations and battlefield victories never could. The family conversation continued for nearly an hour, and Zarek found himself captivated by the dynamics he was witnessing. Chen's younger brother had apparently started university and was struggling with his studies. Instead of dismissing these concerns as trivial compared to galactic warfare, Chen engaged seriously with the problem, offering advice and encouragement. Remember what Dad always said about breaking big problems into smaller pieces. You don't have to understand everything at once. Just focus on today's assignment, then tomorrow's. Before you know it, you'll be looking back wondering why you were so worried. A younger female appeared in the hologram, someone Chen addressed as his sister. She was apparently involved in some kind of environmental restoration project on Earth, working to repair damage from the planet's industrial period. Chen listened intently as she described her work, asking detailed questions that showed genuine interest and pride in her accomplishments. That's amazing, Sarah. You're probably saving more lives than I am out here. Clean water and healthy ecosystems, that's the foundation everything else builds on. I'm proud of you. The general was struck by Chen's perspective on his own military service compared to his sister's civilian work. Most soldiers in Zarek's experience saw their role as the most important possible contribution to society, but Chen seemed to view his service as just one part of a larger effort, no more or less valuable than what others were doing in their own spheres. Chen's father appeared in the transmission, and the conversation took on a different tone. The older human had clearly been worried about his son's safety, and Chen spent considerable time reassuring him without revealing any classified information about their operations. The security protocols are extensive. Dad, we have backup plans for our backup plans, and the technology we're working with now is incredible. Defensive systems that would have been pure science fiction when you were my age. What impressed Zarek was Chen's ability to be honest about the dangers he faced while still providing comfort to his family. The human never lied or minimized the risks, but he focused on the preparations and protections that were in place rather than dwelling on the threats they faced. The conversation eventually turned to Chen's plans for the future, after his military service ended. This was territory that Zarek had never considered. Among Calaxians, military service was typically a lifetime commitment. The idea of transitioning back to civilian life was foreign to his understanding. I've been thinking about teaching when I get back, Chen said thoughtfully. Maybe history or social studies. I think my experiences out here could help kids understand how different cultures can work together. Show them that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. The general found this notion remarkable. Chen was not simply enduring his military service until he could return to his previous life. He was planning to use his experiences to benefit others, to share the lessons he was learning about cooperation and understanding between different species. As the family conversation wound down, each member offered expressions of love and support that seemed to physically strengthen Chen. The human's posture straightened, his eyes brightened, and the fatigue that had been evident since the recent mission appeared to lift from his shoulders. I love you all. Take care of each other, and I'll talk to you again next week. Mom, don't worry so much. I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I should be doing. After ending the transmission, Chen sat quietly for several minutes, clearly processing the emotional impact of the conversation. When he finally moved, it was to return to his memorial corner where he added 2 new photos to the display. Jenkins and Kozlov, the soldiers they had lost on the recent mission. You guys would have liked my family, Chen said to the new additions.
Mom would have made you feel right at home.
She's got this way of making everyone feel like they belong no matter where they come from. The human lit candles for the fallen soldiers and spent a few minutes in silent contemplation. When he spoke again, his voice carried a determination that Zarek had heard many times in combat situations. I promise you both, your sacrifice won't be forgotten. The civilians we saved, they're going home to their families because of what you did. That has to mean something. That has to be enough. Chen rose and moved to his sleeping area, but before settling down for the night, he performed one final ritual. From a small box beside his bed, he removed what appeared to be a simple pendant on a chain. The metal was worn smooth with age, and Zarek could see that it bore some kind of inscription. Keep him safe and bring him home, Chen read aloud, obviously reciting words he had memorized long ago.
Thanks, Grandma.
Still working on the coming home part, but I'm definitely staying safe. The human fastened the pendant around his neck and lay down on his simple military cot. Within minutes, his breathing became deep and regular, indicating that he had fallen asleep. But even in sleep, Chen's face maintained a peaceful expression, that seemed impossible for someone who had faced the horrors of warfare just hours before. General Zarak remained in his hidden position for several more minutes, processing everything he had witnessed. His understanding of human psychology and motivation had been completely transformed by this glimpse into Chen's private world. The young soldier's extraordinary courage and effectiveness in combat did not come from disconnection or emotional numbness. Instead, they emerged from a deeper connection to life and love than the general had ever imagined possible. As Zarak finally made his way back to his own quarters, his mind raced with implications. If Chen's approach to military service was representative of human psychology in general, then his species possessed advantages that went far beyond their already impressive physical capabilities and tactical adaptability. The general had always believed that emotional attachment was a weakness that compromised military effectiveness. His own species had built their military tradition on the principle that personal feelings must be subordinated to duty and efficiency. Yet Chen had shown him a different model, one where love and connection actually enhanced performance rather than hindering it. The implications were staggering. If humans could maintain their emotional bonds while serving in combat roles, they might be able to sustain longer deployments without the psychological breakdown that affected most species. Their motivation would remain strong because they were fighting for something specific and personal, not just abstract principles or military objectives. More than that, humans like Chen seemed capable of forming genuine connections with alien species, treating them not as useful allies or necessary partners, but as individuals worthy of care and respect. This could revolutionize how the Galactic Defense Force approached interspecies cooperation. The next morning brought a crisis that would test everything General Zarak had learned about human nature. Long-range sensors detected a massive void swarm fleet approaching the Centauri system, home to over 2 billion civilians across 3 inhabited worlds. The attack force was larger than anything they had encountered before, and initial projections suggested that their current defensive capabilities would be insufficient to repel the invasion. Emergency briefings were called throughout the station as commanders scrambled to develop response strategies. Zarak found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to request volunteers for what would essentially be a suicide mission. Someone would need to take a small, fast ship deep into enemy territory to gather intelligence on the swarm's new capabilities and tactics. When Chen volunteered without hesitation, Zarak felt a complex mix of emotions that his species rarely experienced. The general knew that Chen was the best choice for the mission. His tactical skills, adaptability, and pure determination made him more likely to succeed than any other soldier under Zarak's command. But after witnessing the human's private world, the general also understood exactly what would be lost if Chen did not return. Private Chen, this mission has a survival probability of less than 15%, Zarak informed him during the pre-mission briefing. Even if you successfully gather the intelligence we need, extraction will be extremely difficult. Are you certain you want to accept this assignment? Chen's response was immediate and unwavering. Yes, sir. Those civilians in the Centauri system have families just like mine. If there's any chance this mission can help save them, then it's worth the risk. The simplicity and sincerity of Chen's answer struck Zarak more powerfully than any elaborate speech about duty or honor could have. The human was not motivated by glory or recognition. He was driven by an understanding that the lives of strangers were just as valuable as the lives of people he loved. As Chen prepared for departure, Zarak made an unprecedented decision. Instead of simply providing the standard mission briefing and sending the human on his way, the general chose to share something of what he had learned the previous night. Private Chen, I want you to know that your approach to military service has been observed and noted. The way you maintain connections to your civilian life while excelling in combat operations is remarkable. It represents a model that other species could learn from. Chen looked surprised by the unexpected praise, but also pleased. Thank you, sir. I've always believed that remembering what we're fighting for makes us better soldiers, not worse ones. Indeed, Zarak agreed. I have come to understand that human strength comes not from disconnection, but from connection. Your species fights more effectively because you never forget who you are fighting for. The general paused, struggling with emotions that his military training had never prepared him to handle. I want you to know that if you do not return from this mission, your sacrifice will be remembered and honored. But more than that, the example you have set will influence how we approach interspecies cooperation in the future. Chen's response revealed the depth of his character once again. Instead of accepting the praise or focusing on his own potential fate, he immediately thought of others. "Sir, if I don't make it back, could you make sure my family gets my personal effects? Not the military stuff, but the things in my quarters. The photos, the letters, the little projects I've been working on. They'll understand what those things mean." "Of course," Zarak replied, though he found himself hoping desperately that such measures would not be necessary. Chen's departure was witnessed by soldiers from a dozen different species, all of whom had served alongside him during various operations. The respect and affection they showed was unlike anything Zarak had seen in his long military career. Soldiers who had barely spoken to each other were united in their concern for the young human. Specialist Click, the insectoid whose molting ceremony Chen had honored with a handmade gift, approached the general after the departure ceremony. Through his translation device, the alien's words carried an emotional weight that transcended species barriers. "General Zarak, human Chen is pack bond to all units. His return flight is necessity for morale strength of combined forces. Request permission to volunteer for extraction support mission." Similar requests came from soldiers representing nearly every species in their command structure. The Rigelian swordmasters offered to provide escort fighters. The Andromedan engineers volunteered to modify ships for enhanced stealth capabilities. Even the usually solitary Vegan mystics offered to use their precognitive abilities to help plan the safest approach routes. Zarak realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic military history. Chen had somehow managed to create genuine bonds across species barriers that most commanders considered impossible to bridge. The human had not simply earned respect through his combat prowess. He had earned love through his consistent demonstration that he valued every life under his protection. The intelligence-gathering mission was scheduled to take 72 hours. For the first 48 hours, Chen maintained regular communication, transmitting detailed reports about Void Swarm fleet movements and tactical formations. His observations revealed that the enemy had indeed developed new technologies and strategies that posed serious threats to their defensive capabilities. But Chen's reports also contained something else, insights that only someone with his unique perspective could have provided. The human had noticed patterns in Void Swarm behavior that suggested their attacks were not random acts of aggression. Instead, they appeared to be systematic attempts to destroy specific types of civilizations, those that had achieved high levels of interspecies cooperation. "The swarm isn't just expanding territory," Chen reported during his final scheduled transmission. "They're specifically targeting mixed populations, planets where multiple species live and work together peacefully. It's like they're trying to prevent the kind of unity we've built in the Defense Force." This revelation transformed their understanding of the conflict entirely. The Void Swarm was not simply another aggressive species seeking resources or territory. They were actively working to prevent the kind of galactic cooperation that could pose a threat to their expansion. The implications were staggering and would require a complete revision of their strategic approach. After Chen's final scheduled transmission, communication was lost. The 48 hours of expected radio silence stretched into 60 hours, then 72, then beyond. Long-range sensors showed no trace of Chen's ship, and deep space monitoring stations reported no emergency, beacons, or distress signals. General Zarak found himself in the unprecedented position of commanding a military force that was emotionally devastated by the apparent loss of a single soldier. Morale plummeted across all species, and several units requested permission to launch unauthorized rescue missions. The general had to issue direct orders to prevent his own officers from abandoning their posts to search for Chen. For the first time in his career, Zarak understood how emotional bonds could indeed affect military effectiveness. But the impact was not what his training had taught him to expect. Instead of making his soldiers weaker or less focused, their concern for Chen was making them more determined than ever to succeed in their overall mission. The combined fleet, defending the Centauri system, had used Chen's intelligence to develop new tactical approaches that took advantage of the swarm's behavioral patterns. Mixed species units coordinated their attacks in ways that exploited the enemy's apparent confusion when facing truly integrated forces. But even as they achieved unprecedented success against the Void Swarm, Every soldier in the fleet continued to hope for some sign that Chen had survived his mission. Search and rescue operations continued alongside the main battle, with volunteers from every species participating in systematic sweeps of the areas where the human might have taken refuge. On the 5th day after Chen's disappearance, long-range sensors detected an impossible signal. A single ship was approaching the Centauri system from the direction of Void Swarm territory, moving slowly and broadcasting human identification codes. The vessel was heavily damaged, barely maintaining life support, but it was undeniably Chen's reconnaissance ship. General Zarek personally led the rescue operation, bringing Chen aboard the command vessel where medical teams from multiple species worked together to treat his injuries. The human was unconscious but alive, and his ship's databanks contained intelligence that would prove invaluable in their ongoing conflict with the Void Swarm. But it was not the military value of Chen's mission that brought tears to General Zarek's crystalline eyes. It was what the medical teams discovered when they were treating the human's injuries. Despite being alone in hostile territory for days, facing impossible odds and carrying information vital to the survival of billions, Chen had somehow found space in his damaged ship for something that had nothing to do with military objectives. Carefully secured in Chen's personal gear were 3 small objects that the human had risked his life to protect. The first was a data crystal containing recorded messages from his family, the same quantum communications he had cherished during his private moments. The second was the worn blanket his grandmother had made, still wrapped around a collection of the gifts he had been crafting for his alien comrades. The third object was what finally broke through the general's emotional barriers completely. It was a small figurine, hastily carved from debris Chen had found during his mission. The figure depicted a Calaxian warrior and a human soldier standing side by side, their weapons lowered, their postures suggesting cooperation rather than conflict. Attached to the figurine was a note written in Chen's precise handwriting. For General Zarek, who taught me that strength comes in many forms. Thank you for showing me what leadership really means. As Zarek held the small carving, he realized that Chen had created it during the most dangerous mission of his career. While hiding from enemy patrols and nursing wounds that should have been fatal, the human had used his limited time and resources, not just to gather military intelligence, but to express gratitude and friendship to someone he had never spoken with personally about anything other than official business. When Chen finally regained consciousness 3 days later, his first words were not about his mission or his injuries. Instead, he asked about the casualties from the battle, about whether the civilians in the Centauri system were safe, and about the status of his fellow soldiers. How many did we lose? Chen asked weakly as General Zarek visited his medical bay. Fewer than we feared, thanks to the intelligence you provided, the general replied. Your observations about Void Swarm targeting patterns allowed us to develop counter-strategies that saved thousands of lives. Chen nodded with satisfaction, then looked directly at Zarek with an expression the general had never seen before. It was not the formal respect of a subordinate addressing a superior officer. It was the open warmth of one person acknowledging another as a friend. I heard you led the rescue operation personally, sir. That means a lot to me. It was the least I could do, Zarek replied, struggling with emotions that his species had no proper words to express. Your example has taught me more about leadership than centuries of military tradition. The general paused, then made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. Private Chen, I have observed your personal practices during off-duty hours, the way you maintain connections to your family, the care you show for your comrades, the respect you demonstrate for all forms of life. These are not signs of weakness as my species has traditionally believed. They are sources of strength that make you the finest soldier I have ever commanded. Chen's eyes widened with surprise but also with understanding. You followed me that night after the Kepler mission. I did, Zarek admitted. And what I saw changed my understanding of what it means to be both a soldier and a sentient being. You fight not because you have disconnected from life and love, but because your connections to them are so strong that you cannot bear to see them threatened. The conversation that followed lasted for hours, with Chen sharing insights about human psychology and social bonds that revolutionized Zarek's approach to military command. The general learned about concepts like family, friendship, and community that existed in human society in ways that had no equivalent in Calaxian culture. More importantly, Zarak began to understand how these connections could be fostered between different species. Chen's approach to interspecies relationships was not based on mere tolerance or professional cooperation. It was founded on genuine curiosity about other cultures and a sincere desire to find common ground across biological and social differences. In the weeks that followed, General Zarak implemented changes throughout his command structure that reflected what he had learned from Chen's example. Mixed species units were given time and resources to develop personal bonds between their members. Cultural exchange programs were established to help different species understand each other's customs and values. Most significantly, the general began sharing Chen's story with other commanders throughout the Galactic Defense Force, the tale of a human soldier who fought more effectively, because he loved more deeply spread through military circles, challenging traditional assumptions about the relationship between emotional attachment and combat effectiveness. Chen's approach became a model for a new kind of military service, one that recognized the strength that came from connection rather than isolation. Soldiers were encouraged to maintain ties to their homeworlds and civilian lives, to form genuine friendships with comrades from other species, and to remember always that they were fighting to protect something precious, rather than simply to destroy something threatening. The impact on military effectiveness was immediate and dramatic. Units that adopted Chen's model showed improved morale, better coordination between species, and significantly lower rates of psychological breakdown during extended deployments. More importantly, they began achieving tactical successes that had seemed impossible under the old paradigm of emotional disconnection. General Zarak would later write in his memoirs that following Chen during those private hours had been the most important decision of his military career. It had revealed a fundamental truth about the nature of strength and courage that would reshape not just military doctrine, but the entire approach to interspecies cooperation in the galaxy. The young human soldier had shown him that the greatest warriors were not those who had given up everything for their duty, but those who had found something worth giving everything for. In Chen's quiet moments with his memories and connections, Zarak had discovered the secret of human resilience, the source of their extraordinary courage in the face of impossible odds. And in the end, it was this discovery that would prove decisive in humanity's greatest contribution to the galactic community, not their technology or their tactics, but their profound understanding that love and duty were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of the same noble purpose.